The bill obviously before us is something that I know a number of speakers, including myself, it's very close to our hearts about the issue that is before us, because being a Victorian senator, I know all too well, sadly, the impact that anti-Semitism is actually having in our community, scourge that is having in our community, and the impact that is having on my friends, good friends of mine who are distraught about what is occurring in Melbourne and in Sydney and in other parts of the country, but particularly our two main cities. And living in the year 2025, I just would have thought there'd be people in our society that would have learnt from lessons of the past, who would understand that any form of hate speech is just not acceptable in today's society. But the level of hate that has been directed towards Australian Jewish members, Jewish community, is just abhorrent and, quite frankly, needs to be called out. And it is good to see that, despite some of the other contributions we've heard either before or others in the other place, that there is a general bipartisanship on stamping out anti-Semitism in this country. What the government has also been committed to do, and has done for some time now, has tried to work with both the Jewish community, members of this place in the Parliament, with our state governments and our police, both at a federal and state level, about having a coordinated approach about not just educating people about why it is not right, why it is not appropriate, and why it is having a detrimental impact on the lives of many people in our society. And we have seen protests, we have seen people voicing opposition to events that are currently occurring and have for some time over in the Middle East, particularly in Israel and the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And we need to, as a government and as parliamentarians, balance that fine line between free speech and what is the rights of individuals in our society, making sure that they feel safe and secure, especially when they just want to go about their own lives with their families every single day. The Albanese government has stated on multiple occasions that there is no place for anti-Semitism. Any kind of racism, vilification or hate speech needs to be called out, and it needs to be stamped out. And that does include our universities. I can't remember a time of such intense anti-Semitism and abuse that is being directed to members of the Jewish community. We're a very proud multicultural society where people are currently hurting. It does go to the fabric of our multicultural society, the fantastic policies that I think both sides of politics have embraced for many, many decades, having people come from overseas to call Australia home. So it cannot be left unaddressed. Just like our schools, universities are also places where people from all backgrounds and experiences go to learn, study, teach and strive to make a positive difference in the world. And this includes our Jewish students and staff. I know the Jewish community is hurting because I speak to a lot of them. I speak to many in the community, and I know that they are deeply concerned. It is also a great concern that I and others have heard from the members of this community that they feel unsafe on our university campuses. All students and staff have a right to feel and be safe in Australia. And it's also worth reminding the Senate that we have, as a government, established a parliamentary joint committee in this place that is currently conducting an inquiry into anti-Semitism. And last October, the government also referred anti-Semitism at Australian universities to the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights for inquiry. And guess it's chaired by, Mr. Josh Burns from the other place, member for Macnamara, who is a leading example on this issue, and I know is very close to his heart. I know the committee is going through a very thorough process, and as part of that inquiry, the committee is considering the prevalence, the nature and the experience of anti-Semitism at universities, including the frameworks and policies to prevent and to respond to it and support its students and staff. And I would really hope that our Vice-Chancellors, our university leadership, is also looking very carefully and taken seriously about the processes that this parliament has set up. Because it really does start to get to people where they see time and time again stories in the media of people making some ridiculous and, quite frankly, stupid comments that are directed towards the Jewish community. The Jewish community in our country are very proud Australians. Very proud Australians, just like many others who have migrated and called Australia home. They have every right to live their lives without intimidation and prejudice. As political leaders in this place, we have an obligation to deal with these very sensitive matters in a very calm, respectful and civil way. We have a responsibility to calm any fears that people have in our society, not to inflame tensions. Australia is a very diverse and multicultural nation, and we should celebrate this every single day. A nation where everyone should be able to live without fear of being discriminated against or vilified because of who they are or where they originated from. The government wants people in the Middle East to live harmoniously, and we also want to advocate for that peace and stability in that region. That begins here, right here in our own backyard. I'd like to also place on the record again my enduring support for the people of Israel and the Australian Jewish community, because it saddens me that there are some who have sought to cause division and who continue to cause division. Because language of division, language of hate, has a very real effect outside of these walls here in the Senate and in the other place. So I condemn in the strongest possible terms the rise of anti-Semitism in our country and those who encourage it. It breaks my heart that the Australian Jewish community have been and continue to be subjected to very hateful prejudice, particularly those in my home state and in my great city of Melbourne. I vividly recall one particular attack where a Jewish school was graffitied, Mount Scopus, and I used to go to university right next door for many, many years. And the government has stood in solidarity with that school and has stood in solidarity with that community. I recall the Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, even visited the school soon after that attack and met with the principal. And what we saw that the Prime Minister also visited the synagogue that was also recently attacked with the member for McNamara. And it was those words that were written on the wall of that school, the vandalisms of the offices and the destruction of places of worship and arson attacks, that I really am calling for it to stop. And I know many in this place are also calling to stop. The Jewish community in our country are very proud and have contributed many ways to our great country, and a people whose history has been so characterised by persecution by others should feel safe in a country like ours. And like every Australian, they have a right to live their lives without fear and prejudice. And as the government has said repeatedly, we believe in the right of the State of Israel to exist alongside a free and democratic state of Palestine. As community leaders, we have an obligation to call out behaviour that goes against the very essence of our Australian spirit and way of life. And that is why I will keep using my voice to advocate for peace and harmony for Jewish students, teachers and communities. It is the only way forward.